Hello! I'm glad you made it. I'm glad you found your way here. This is the second day of me and my friends discussing Bras and Broomsticks. So we'll be wearing different clothes, obviously. We're covering the second half of the book, and similar to the last two videos, we're chopping this up into two parts because Chelsea, Maya, and I had a lot to say. So I anticipate that part 4 should also be available by the time you're watching this. Fingers crossed, knock on wood. In terms of an intro, that's really all I had to tell you. We can just transition smoothly into past Jay, Maya, and Chelsea now.
Okay, so hello to my amazing internet friends and the 5 of us that remember Bras and Broomsticks by Sarah Mlynowski. I am so excited to be back. We have finished Bras and Broomsticks. We read the second half of the book, and there's a lot happening. So we left off at the end of chapter 11, which is the fashion show tryout scene. The Monday after the tryouts, Rachel is kind of like waiting with bated breath to see if she got in. And spoiler alert, she does. All of her fantasies about being popular come true in rapid succession. She is immediately like very friendly with Jewel, and it seems as if like they never had like a pause in their friendship. Rachel at one point goes out to after school pizza with the popular kids, which is something she's always wanted. She gets to talk to Raph, her crush, one of the two of them. A lot of things are just like really falling into place for Rachel at this very moment. I thought it was funny. Like I had some sticky notes, and you can feel free to jump in here at any time. But one of the sticky notes I highlighted was when she's having her first like real interaction with Raph, and he's like, "Hey, like we should practice our like slow dance together at lunch." She's like, "Yes." He's like, "Great, like want to meet by my locker?" And she's like, "Yeah, it's like right next to like Mr. Silverson's class." And then she's like, "Oh no, like I know where his locker is." But then she says, "Yeah, it's like down the hall from yours." And I'm like, he knows where her locker is. And
Yeah,
so
that was cute. I
very
put a
cute.
note on that, and it was what happened, that I threw my Kindle across the bed when that first happened, because I was like, no, 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 Rachel, don't. But that was not the first time I had to step away from my Kindle, because there was a lot of secondhand embarrassment in the second half of this book. The beginning.
Also was very charmed by her and Raph getting closer, like their cute little non-flirting dating thing. And I was just like,
Yeah.
oh, this was the only thing that I wanted in high school. It was not the only thing. I wanted a lot of things. But that was one of them. And I was just like, oh, it's cute. And even as a grown woman, semi-grown woman, quarter grown woman, I still long for that. Not now, but I wanted that for myself back then. And I still
Yeah.
want that for my younger self.
Yeah.
It's a
No,
fun
they were
thing.
cute. And Raph was like a love interest I could root for. Oh, except for the fact that he had like terrible friends, that all of his friends were like assholes. He seemed
Yeah.
like a nice guy, but I just like those parties and all those people. Ugh, they all seemed terrible.
Since you brought that up, I want to put a pin in that because I do want to bring that up later. But like, yes, I do find Raph delightful. Like later when Raph and Rachel have like this really cute like conversation, like when they're flirting at like Mick's party, it's like freaking adorable. It's delightful. There's a lot of like things that like 14-year-old me was living for. Well, 12-year-old me is more accurate.
The math
There's
flirting
yeah.
really was like a reminiscent of like Mean Girls. Like I was like a
Yeah.
girl who likes math, and then a boy who like pokes fun at the math, and but in like a cute way.
Oh my god, yes.
Also, I
didn't
liked
catch
that like you could tell like he was also nervous because he kept bringing up the math thing as like, and it's like
His
if
point
the
of
joke
reference
had died, but like he just kept, because he wanted something to say. Like the next day when he sees her in school, he brings it up again, and it's just like he's trying, but like
He's
they don't
just
have any
nervous.
other like focal point to like get to yet, so he's just gonna keep killing the joke.
I mean, like the next scene that like I have to talk about is the party where all this like math related banter takes place. So I think we should just jump to that. I don't want to steamroll over though. Like one last thing is that like there's a brief scene like the next day where Raph and Rachel are practicing their slow dance, and she just cannot stop sniffing him.
Oh, and he's like, "Are you okay?"
Amazing, unreal. Like I was like, Rachel, you need to have subtle sniffs. Like that's something you'll learn as you get older, how to not be creepy.
There's a way to do it where it's just breathing.
Yeah.
You don't have to have. You could just do one. See? Very, not from experience, but you can do it subtly.
Yeah. That's something Rachel will learn, how to become more clandestine.
Something we
Theoretically.
all learn with age.
But yeah, before they meet up, well, when they meet up to head to the party together, her and Jewel head to the party together. She has a moment where she's like waiting for her, and she's like, "Oh, I used to give her a fake time of 20 to 30 minutes earlier so I wouldn't have to wait." And I was like, I do this too, and I feel like I've done it to both of you before.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we need to leave at like 4:00 when really we probably need to leave at like 4:20, but I'm like, this way I just don't have to be stressed out. But
that's fair, and that's smart, because like also LA traffic, it's just hard to gauge traffic. But yeah, like that's really smart.
But I was like, oh, I feel called out right now that me and Rachel share that.
But it was so cute to like have that moment where like she's waiting for Jewel, and then Jewel finally comes around the corner and it's like nothing has changed. Like they just link arms and just start going. It was just very cute.
I think that's something they did a really good job of. The relationship with Jewel does feel like very like, oh, I can feel they have like friend chemistry, and I can see why like, Rachel missed this. But obviously, Jewel isn't a very good friend, but it's like, I get it. And I feel like I've felt that about people before, where I'm like, when I'm with them, it's super cool and I want to be friends with them and I think they're super cool and we have a good time. But then it's like, they just are not good friends.
No, I agree. That's so authentic. Like it still feels really authentic, even reading it now. Still on the Jewel train. So like when they get to the party, like when Jewel takes off like her puffy jacket, like we revealed that who let this girl get a belly button piercing?
Yeah, 14. She's 14 years old.
I was floored. I was shocked.
Don't you guys know this is New York? Okay.
So cosmopolitan.
She was also wearing a song, so I was just thinking about our whale tail days.
I mean,
I do need to find that book series I was telling you about, where the cover is just like these 3 teenage girls in thongs. It's animated like this, because I read a bunch of books that had animated covers like this. But I really loved that series, and it was like a group of popular girls, and they were popular because they all had whale tails. And this is so adorable. I just Googled like whale tail YA book series, and it's all these cute, adorable books about whales. And I'm like, that is not it.
Not what you're thinking of.
But that's cute that they thought so.
Once they were at the party, I was so anxious on her behalf. I like got so much social anxiety. I highlighted the like, why didn't I think of that? I could have just squashed myself in regards to not having anywhere to sit. And then that girl who's like an asshole, I forget what her name was, Missy? Melissa. When Melissa like squashes herself down, and then like she sits down, but then she like kind of has to pee and she doesn't want to go up and lose her seat. And then, I mean, it's nice that she like runs into Ralph, because then when she comes back down, they're gone, and it's like fine for her because she can kind of chat with Ralph. But that is like such a nightmare, like social anxiety party situation. I was so exhausted by that scene.
Yeah, and like Jewel like doesn't like make an effort to invite Rachel into the conversation. Like she like literally has to like sit down on the floor, and like Jewel, like you're fun to talk to, but you're being a little bit of the worst. You're not being a good like attentive friend.
She's not a friend, which is like, it's one of those things that's like, I don't fully blame her as a character, but it's just, I just remember the food chain of high school and just always wanting to one up and not being socially conscious of anything else. And
yeah, it's definitely a situation where Jewel is like, I am not here to uplift other women. I am rising to the top.
Also who's the guy that's like hugging all of them and like lifting them off the ground
Mick.
when they come into the park? Mick. Okay, that also, I was like, oh wow, I remember the guys would do that all the time, and I get it. 'Cause do you remember when like you hugged every person when you saw them in school?
I hated that
literally
so much.
because like everyone was just getting to that point where you just wanted to touch each other, and it was like gross, but also like a weird thing that everyone kind of felt like they needed.
Do you remember the weird kind of self-conscious version of that when it was like so many side hugs, like all the side hugs?
Yeah.
That was more like girls would side hug each other. Because I guess, God forbid our boobs touch. I don't know if that's why people side hugged. I don't know.
Well, I feel like it was the opposite when guys would hug, because the whole thing was they'd hug really hard so they could feel the boobs with the hug. You knew, like everyone knew that's what was happening, but like they did it in a way where it's like, oh, we're friends, like let's hug. It's like I hugged you 2 periods ago, but okay. But yeah, like that, I was getting really triggered by the guy who's like lifting all the girls off the ground and like hugging them. I was like, that was every theater cast party ever.
Another thing about Mick is that like Rachel smells a hint of alcohol on his breath, and Mick is also 14, so I'm like, that's great. I love to see 14-year-olds dipping into liquor.
I keep forgetting that they're 14, because at the time the belly button ring and the alcohol did not like go like, oh, I was just like, no, they're 16, and then I was like, oh, they're 14. You guys are reminding me.
Another thing, I think that they mentioned that someone from college is there, and I'm like, I mean, for them, I'm like, oh, that's so cool. They're at a party with college kids, but then for this guy at college that happens to be at a party with 14-year-olds.
But it was somebody's older sibling, right? Which is
a
little bit better.
It makes sense, yeah.
What college kid is partying with their 14-year-old sibling? That's weird.
And letting him drink at 14.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand when you're 16, 17 and still in school, but if you're going to college and then coming home and letting your 14-year-old sibling and all his 14-year-old friends drink.
I'm like, because that's about a similar age difference between me and my brother. And I could not think in any world where when I was 14, my brother was like, no, we do not hang out. We are not friends. Like, we're friends now, but not when I was 14. He was busy with college and had no interest in ever providing me alcohol or anything like that.
Okay, but later at this party, so Rachel has to pee, so she like finally gets up to pee, and like while she's in the bathroom, someone almost walks in on her, and it happens to be Raph, which is a moment where she initially wants to die inside, but it works out in her favor. He clearly very much likes her, and she can't see it yet, but yes. They have their cute Bants where they talk a lot about math, and I kind of thought that was really funny. He makes a joke about how like, oh, he saw like a trophy with her name on it in the cabinet, and she's like, maybe he didn't read it too closely, maybe he doesn't know it's math. And then he immediately asks her, what's the square root of 289? And she's like, damn it.
And it's like also like earlier in the book, she mentions that the like trophy's kind of hidden in the back too. So he was like looking, like he was really investigating the trophy case.
I mean, he also knew where her locker was. I'm just saying.
That's true.
Yeah. Another thing I would like to note is that apparently Raph's elective is creative writing.
Yeah. I chuckled.
He's a soft boy. He's a sensitive writer boy.
Middle school me totally had a crush on him. I was like, he writes and he's cute. Say no more.
I know. Yeah. Same here.
Going off of Gilmore Girls, if I saw a boy with a book in his back pocket,
no, for sure.
I was like, he's literate.
The bar is so low. He can read. This boy can read. Wow.
But this party scene ends with Rachel being asked out on a date to go see a concert.
A
quasi-date. Rachel, it's a date. Like, it's a date.
I mean, I know that. I feel like that's so true though. That kind of weird, like, oh, we don't put a label on it. That I feel like that's very like realistic.
That's true. And it's like when you're a child, like, I don't know, like you don't really know what defines a date yet or not a date. Like you don't want to like assume it's a date and be embarrassed if it's not.
Exactly. And he didn't kiss her. And I feel like
He
that
didn't
was like...
kiss. He patted her on the shoulder. But the date went well, and it actually ends with Raph asking her to be his date for the spring fling, which is both great and very troublesome for Rachel. I have always like been so stressed by this. I am firmly believing that she should not have risked it. Like I know that she was trying to break up her dad and STV. Like I know her intention was to ideally be free on that day, but like I'm like, Rachel, you can't really, like, this is too high stakes.
Yeah, that always, I remember this time it didn't bug me as much, but I actually do really remember the first time I read it being like, don't double book yourself. Like I was really nervous about that.
It's funny because I know you, Maya, and I do feel like double booking yourself would be a nightmare.
I mean, like as an assistant now, like I hate like having a hold and then like something is overlapping with that hold, and I'm like, but what if we confirm the hold? Like, what happens then?
That.
After this date, like Rachel comes back to school, she's like high on life, but Tammy is kind of like being a buzzkill in her eyes because Sammy's like, hey, like, weren't you at your dad's this weekend? Like, I tried calling you and you never answered. And she's like, can't tell her like all these things that are happening, just to foreshadow that there is tension in their friendship.
He's being the jewel to Tammy.
She is. In book 2, like Rachel like absolutely learns her lesson and she never takes Tammy for granted again.
Oh,
yeah.
That's good.
So like, yeah, so I'm very like impatient to like see that. Additionally, I think it's time to cut to the other like big plot that's happening here, which is the dad and SDB wedding, and the plans to break it up. So right now, the first plan that they attempted with the pimples failed miserably, as we, the 26-year-olds, expected. But their new plan is that, like, okay, like clearly, like changing her appearance and like showing her to be physically ugly didn't work. So we have to show our father how truly awful she is. And so they decide to give her a truth spell or a truth serum. I found this to be super delightful, just like them planning it. Like they go to the grocery store to buy like supplies together.
And a pizza to cover up that they got supplies.
Yes, that was so cute. But yes, they like cast their spell. And then the next morning they try to like slip it into her coffee. And I quite enjoyed this scene because like Rachel runs into Starbucks and she orders 2 coffees for the 2 of them. But then when she comes back, like she can't remember which one she said.
So stupid. I knew it was gonna. I was like, get a
like
hot drink. Like
I know. I was like, the second she said, "I'll get the same thing," I was like, she's not gonna know which one she put it in. Why would you do that?
That's very funny. I didn't think of it that way. Like as someone who like gets really overwhelmed by menus, like I could see just like being like, I'll just have what she's having. Not in the what movie is that, When Harry Met Sally way.
Yeah. And just Miri, her making eye contact with Miri, as she was like, I could really see that in Miri being like, oh my God.
Yeah, I know.
Poor Miri, the stress.
She had one job and she
had I know Miri's doing all the work, and then suddenly like Rachel's like, I can do this, I can carry it to the finish line, and she's like, uh-oh. You know that Miri would have labeled the cups specifically.
100%.
But I also was very upset with her. I was just like, you label the cups or you label your hands so you know, or you don't order the exact same thing.
Side note, this is completely unrelated, but like, so Rachel has like a line where like when she's in Starbucks, like she like makes fun of the fact that a small is called a tall. And
so annoying.
I know. I think that had lasting repercussions for me because whenever I go to Starbucks, I have never said like I'll have a tall. I've only ever said small, and I think it's because like I think because I was like, Rachel made fun of it and I was just carrying that with me.
That's so funny because I feel like that was like at that time, that was like a really popular joke for people to make about how stupid
was
Starbucks
very
drink orders were. Like, I feel like
Yeah.
most comedy movies had it, and it was just like, I get it, I get the joke, I get it, but can we move on? Like,
Yeah.
Sarah does this, and sometimes I think it works where it's just like, yeah, this is just how a teenage girl thinks. But then there's other times where I'm just like, I feel like you're getting off topic just to get off topic and sound like a teenage girl, and it's
mm,
No, I agree with that. Like, I absolutely agree that like some of her like rants like come back like in a way, or like some of the things she mentions,
Yeah.
like Sansa's gift comes back.
yeah.
Like little things come back, but it's like a lot of it doesn't.
mm.
But to get us back on track, for
After we had our rant.
so the truth serum is a success. Rachel gives STV the correct cup, and so like this just like prompts a lot of big moments for them where they're like, oh yes, we're gonna see STV's ugly come out in front of everybody, and it just completely backfires on them. It starts at the dress fitting where like they are in their bridesmaids outfits, which they think look like terrible, and then they're like, Jennifer, like, what do you think about our outfits? And they're like, oh, here it comes. And then she's like, you look beautiful. Like, these girls were shook. Like, I have a sticky note that says exactly that, because they were like, what is happening? Our entire perception of this woman is just like completely breaking down, which is very fun. Like they hear all these lines, or like at one point like STV is just like kind of like picking up Chrissy, and it's like, I love you so much, like more than the moon and the stars. And they're like, what is happening with this woman? Like, what did we do? Side note, also, like, I noticed that like when STV is like giving all these compliments and like saying how she really feels, you know, like we talked before about how I'm like wondering like what, like how much of it is like Jennifer is a little like micromanaging and bitchy, and how much of it is Rachel+Miri's embellishment. And I found it interesting that the dressmaker, Judy, like asks her like, hey, are you feeling okay? Like, so it was like interesting that this was like a break in the general demeanor for her as well. So I don't know what that means.
It was something that kind of bugged me, and I can kind of see that when she was being mean, it was through the eyes of Rachel, so it comes across a little bit more mean. But I also feel like it did just seem like she was being like specifically waiting for the dad to leave to say things to the girls, like just it seemed very deliberate and a little manipulative for her to switch and be nice but like noticeable to other people and not just Rachel. Because if it was just Rachel, then I could be like, Rachel and Miri, then I could be like, okay, like everything they were seeing was through the lens of she hates us. Now that she knows that she has the truth serum and she's being this nice, then they're confused, and I can kind of see that. But yeah, the fact that other people are noticing it, it just felt like she could be a little bit more closed off, like Maya said, but I also feel like if she just did a full 180, it just feels a little weird.
I do also think, and I thought this was a very interesting kind of telling moment of STV's like honesty talk, is when she's like, my biggest fear is that your father will leave me the way he did your mother. And then at the end, you also have Rachel kind of talking about that, where she's also like, which also very similar to Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, where she was like, I can't be mad at him because I'm like worried he'll leave us like he did our mom. So I do kind of feel like that's why she's like scared to like be angry at him about the chopsticks, you know, things like that. And then it's like when she does finally like, you know, go in on him about the chopsticks, about him working and stuff like that, you could tell she's like more comfortable like nagging him or being, you know, kind of like not always like so into it to him, because, you know, the truth serum is keeping her from, you know, or forcing her to do that despite her fear of him leaving, which also to me is kind of why she also kind of kept her criticisms of the girls separate, because she was like, the girls aren't going to leave me, but, you know, if he's there, then maybe he'll be like, you know.
Yeah, I can
Yeah,
actually see that.
point.
That context makes a lot more sense, that like like that, like in her heart, like Jennifer is not afraid to like call out something that she doesn't like, but if it's like to the father who is like the man that she really doesn't want to leave her, then I think it makes sense that she is obviously like putting on like a more not an act, but like it like being a lot more accommodating around him. I think
And
that
agreeable,
definitely,
yeah.
yeah,
But which I don't necessarily think is a good basis on a relationship, that she's so worried he's gonna leave her. I'm saying this is getting ahead of things a little bit, but it's also just like one of the many things for why what I think Rachel and Miri do with the love spell later on is so cruel. Like it's cruel to STB, like so clearly that like Jessica, like Jennifer told them that that was like her biggest fear, and then to the mom even more so. Gosh, it's crazy.
Because of what you said, Maya, where it's like she's so afraid of losing the dad or the dad leaving her. And then that's why everything is so cruel, and that's why she does refrain from telling him some of the things she ends up telling him when she has the truth serum. Is that I almost wish, which this is not that kind of book, but like I do wish it would have been more difficult, and we would have seen how difficult it was for her to take the dad back. Like I do feel like that is something, if they made a movie and they could show multiple perspectives, I think that's something that
For
I
sure.
think would have really been
that was so sped up.
Yeah,
it was
such
very
a sped up thing.
Jennifer, I think we need to talk about your willingness to take back the man who like left you the day before your wedding.
Yeah, and said he was, because especially if that's her biggest fear, I don't think she would be like, after one day, forgive him and marry him. I'd be like,
yeah,
no,
that's crazy.
And I feel like it would have been so much better if like, yeah, Rachel showed up and her dad was there, but they were fighting and saying, especially because I do think Rachel still got off a little easy when it comes to her family. Like with the school stuff, that's super embarrassing. Awful.
So rough.
But
so rough.
So rough. But the family stuff, like, yeah, her mom was upset and like talked to her, but I feel like it actually would have been really good for Rachel to open the door and see like her dad and STB like yelling at each other about like legitimate adult things, and her being like, oh, like I'm so caught up in my own, like, and she already at this point knows, but I do think it would have hammered in for her to be like, even though like all this stuff and I was wrapped up in my own stuff, like I'm still a child. Like my feelings of like for Raph and all of this stuff and worrying about Jewel and stuff like that is still kind of temperate. I mean, that's like a lot to put into a 14-year-old character to realize, so it would be heavy-handed. But I think that would have been a great moment for Rachel to be like, oh shit, like this does have real consequences, and see it. And then, yeah, but then I guess if she saw that, it wouldn't really make sense for her to continue to use magic to fix it, but who knows?
Yeah.
No, I agree. Since me and Chelsea watched Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants last night, I'm like, it was very jarring to me how much that scene reminded me of like the Carmen plot. Like, you know, even just like the bridesmaids fitting stuff, but I was just like, oh my God, this is very Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants.
And this is where I had to cut you off, Past J, Maya, and Chelsea. As I said at the top of this video, there is one more part coming. Thanks so much for being here, and I will hopefully see you in the next one. Okay.